Good morning. What a beautiful day we have. Great day to worship the Lord together. This morning we are beginning a three-part series on one of the more challenging books in the Old Testament, the book of Ecclesiastes. I don't think I've ever did a preaching series on this, so this is going to be kind of fun and challenging as we go through this. But God put this book into the Bible for our benefit, to teach us some things. So we're going to discover some really important truths as we go through this series. The book, written by King Solomon, is about his quest to find meaning in life. What does life mean? Where's meaning? Where's purpose? How do I find that? And he explores that. So he takes us on a journey, and the journey seems kind of depressing at times as he walks through this quest, but he ends up with the answer to this question that many people are asking. What is life all about? What is the meaning of life? And he helps us find that message of hope, and that message that brings us to a place of really putting God as the center of our life. Solomon refers to himself as the teacher because he wants to teach us some things that he has learned. So he says, the teacher or the preacher, I'm sharing these things with you. I think Ecclesiastes is a good commentary, a good word for us here today, in our culture, in our time. Just as Solomon did, there's many people that are trying to find purpose and meaning by pursuing all kinds of things. But like Solomon says, in his pursuit, it's meaningless. A lot of these things people are pursuing, it ends up just being meaningless and empty. If I would put it in my words, as I look around, I would say it's all crazy. It seems like this world has gone mad. You ever say that? I've just recently been saying that to people. It's just crazy. It's just like everything's upside down. It's like the world has gone mad. People are throwing off restraint, pursuing their pleasures with abandonment, and yet there's no happiness. You don't hear any joy. It's all depressing news. Depression and suicide is at an all-time high. Ecclesiastes is a good study for us at this time. Now, this is important. The best way to understand this book is to understand that Solomon is writing it from a perspective of what it's like trying to find meaning without God. So that's kind of the perspective, and that's why he says meaningless, and it seems kind of depressing at times, because he's trying to introduce to us, if you're pursuing life without God, this is where you're going to end up. This is what it's going to feel like. This is what it's going to look like. Meaningless, as he talks about it. Without God, the world does look pretty dark and empty. It really does. Trying to understand life simply with human reasoning will make you a cynic at best or an atheist at worst. This book is very instructive as King Solomon takes us on a journey of what life looks like, simply from a humanistic perspective. But hang in there as we go through this, because throughout the book, Solomon keeps bringing us back to God. It's really discouraging, depressing, what life is all about. Then he keeps bringing us back to God and to a place of hope. Solomon was considered the wealthiest, most educated, most powerful, wisest man of his day. I mean, he was at the top. He had everything, so he's saying, listen to me, I'm going to be your teacher for a while here. I had it all, and I tried it all. So let me tell you the result of that kind of life. He's really blunt at what he learned about trying to find happiness in the pursuit of things. And right out of the gate, he hits us really hard with some of his conclusions of that kind of life. So chapter 1, verse 2, he says, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. everything is meaningless. I mean, that's pretty depressing. But he's trying to set a tone here, and he's trying to help us see and experience with him a pursuit of life without putting God in the center. Life without God is empty and devoid of real meaning. Later in the book, he states that God has set eternity in the hearts of mankind. Every person, there's something that God has set in us. There's a God yearning in the hearts of man. And each person has this, and only a relationship with Jesus, as we would come to discover, only a relationship with Jesus is going to satisfy that yearning. So Solomon's taking us on a quest of trying to fulfill that yearning in all kinds of other ways. And he says, I'm going to teach you what it's like to do that. There's this deep longing in the soul of humanity. So he's taking us on a journey. So let me highlight 3 of the things that he focuses on in chapters 1 and chapter 2. We're going to look at those this morning. The first thing he focuses on is this. He says, the pursuit of education and wisdom is good, but will not satisfy. He says, I've been down that road. I'm the wisest man. I have a knowledge of all things. He had people coming from other countries just to sit at his feet because he had so much understanding and wisdom. So in verse 12 to 14, he says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, chasing after the wind. So he said he tried to understand all things, but it ended up just like, I was just chasing the wind. You know, I would go here, and then I would go here, and it was like the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know, and so I just kept pursuing, and I ended up really empty. Now, he's not speaking against education. Education is good. But he's saying that if that is your only pursuit, and if that's where you're trying to find meaning and purpose and identity, you're not going to find it there. You're not going to find it there. There's things in life that you can simply not fathom through philosophy and much learning. You need to have a view of life through the Creator God and His sovereignty for life to make any kind of sense. The second thing he says is that the pursuit of pleasure and wealth will leave you empty. We all struggle, especially here in the West. We all struggle with what I call the if-only disease. The if-only disease. If only I was smarter. If only I was better looking. If only I was married. If only I was not married. If I had a better car, a bigger house, different parents, my dream job, perfect health. If only when I retire, then I'm going to be really happy. If only I had more money. More money. I mean, just a little more money, or maybe a lot more money. More money. Then I would be happy and fulfilled. But we know, and as Solomon says, money does not buy happiness. There was a group of economists and psychologists, and they did a study on this of wealthy people. And they said that it's just an illusion that wealth will bring happiness. Everybody thinks it. It's just kind of there. Of course, the promotion of selling things and all of that, you buy this and you're going to be happy. You just upgrade and you're going to be happy. And he said, it's just an illusion. It's not true, is what they're saying. They say people always think that more money will make them happier. But the truth is, once you have a roof over your head, basic needs covered, it doesn't do much to fulfill you beyond that. Isn't that interesting? Studies also show that increase in income has a relatively brief effect on life satisfaction. People get used to all the new stuff their money can buy. After a while, the glamour's gone, and I need something else, something better. Studies show that the wealthier people are, the more intense negative emotions they experience. Wealth may make it harder for you to appreciate simple pleasures. When you start making more money, you spend more time making money, and you have less leisure time than you did before. And kind of the end result is this: faith and social relationships are the key to true happiness. So if you're going to invest in something, make it God and make it people in your life, not the pursuit of things. So Solomon, that's what Solomon's saying. We don't even need these studies. Just read the book of Ecclesiastes. It's all there. Solomon lays to rest the great lie that these things in themselves will bring happiness. They may bring temporary pleasure. That's true, but it's temporary. But in the end, it leaves you with even greater emptiness. Like Solomon says, it's just you end up chasing the wind. Solomon says, I had it all. He received 25 tons of gold annually. That's like $1.8 billion was his annual income. That's pretty good. He had 12,000 cavalry horses. In other words, he had a huge army. He had 700 wives and 300 live-in mistresses. Poor guy. He had it all. He tried it all. And he just lays it all on it. He said, look, all those lies that if you just have more and more and more, it just leads to emptiness. It did not bring joy in his life that he was looking for. So let's read what he says to us. Chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. So he's going to run this test. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly. My mind still guiding me with wisdom, I wanted to see what was good for people to do under heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Israel before me. In all of this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Isn't it amazing? Solomon said, I didn't deny myself anything. I had the power, I had the money, everything I wanted to do, I could do. Every pleasure he could imagine, he acquired. He had it all, and yet he was miserable and empty. That's the message he's trying to say. He's, I'm your teacher. I want to teach you. What your culture is saying, what the media is saying, it's lies, lies, lies. It just entices you to go a direction, but you're going to end up chasing the wind. You're going to end up empty. We find the same truth repeated in the New Testament as well. One example is 1 John 2, 15 to 17. Do not love this world nor the things it offers you, for when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, a pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. And this world is fading away along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. So in other words, only a life built on a deep faith, a deep relationship with Jesus Christ is ever going to fulfill you. And that yearning, that thing that God created inside of each person made in his likeness and image. It's only Jesus that will fill that. Number 3, the third thing Solomon says. God wants us to find satisfaction in our work, but not to be ruled by it. We put a lot of emphasis here, especially in this area, on a good, strong work ethic. And that's good. But an overemphasis on work, is Solomon saying, where you think about it night and day and it becomes the thing that drives you, it becomes unhealthy and it becomes meaningless after a while in your life. He says this in verses 22 and 23. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. And Solomon goes on and he bemoans the reality, the fact. He said, I worked so hard for all of this, but someday I'm going to die. And I'm going to leave it all behind. Everything. And I'm going to leave it to maybe his children, others. I'm going to leave it to other people. And who knows what they're going to do with it. They might go out and spend it foolishly. They might waste it. And yet, I put all this hard work into it, but I got to leave it to everybody else. And he says, how meaningless. It's part of the thing that he was pondering about where we put our emphasis and where we put our focus. Not that we shouldn't leave an inheritance, but he's saying if that's simply our goal, there's going to be an emptiness. As Christ followers, we live not with an emptiness. We live with Jesus, with a sense of eternity in our heart. And we are able to store up our riches in heaven. And there is that reward that does go with us. At the end of his depressing talk about how all this is meaningless, Solomon again brings us back to God. When God's directing our lives, there is meaning and purpose. That's what Solomon ends up saying to us. When we live our lives for ourselves, selfishly, it will not satisfy. But Jesus helps us to live our lives for other people. Solomon ends this chapter with these words. He says, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. This too I see is from the hand of God, for without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? In other words, he's saying God does want us to enjoy our life. He does want us to enjoy the work of our hands. In other words, he's saying it's not all meaningless if you have God in it. If you're following God, God does want you to enjoy the life that is given you. He wants us to live an abundant life now and for all of eternity. We're going to close with the song, Christ is Enough. I love the song because it just kind of captures what Solomon is saying here in our text this morning. Christ is my reward. Christ is my reward, not all these things people are chasing after. And he is all of my devotion. He says, now there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. That's what he's saying. That's what we're going to sing and declare in just a minute. Christ is enough for me, the song says. Everything I need is in you. Boy, if we can get that in our hearts. Everything I need, everything that I really desire is in him. Everything else is just extra. But the real thing that counts is him. Let's stand together. And let's make this our response to what Solomon has said. Can we make this our commitment song, our commitment prayer, that we're going to follow him. We're going to follow him. We're not going to turn back. He's our focus.